Well, hello and welcome to what is the final session of Real Estate Live for this week, for October. Gosh, the time has flown by. I've been to 28 of these things over the week. This is the last one. It's going to focus on seaside towns. But to welcome you all to this event, Real Estate Live, for those of you who haven't joined one of these events already, is a week of 3 events online, which helps keep the economic development, inward investment and regeneration conversations going at what is undoubtedly a tricky time. We have been running every one of these events. We've been running a poll and we're going to post that now. Here you go. You can make your choice. What is the most important factor in unlocking developments and ensuring the continued strength of UK real estate? Make your choice. We'll give you the results at the end of the event. We will also add all these together into one big poll across all of the events of the week, so that we can see what everybody thinks. Seaside towns, as you can see from my backdrop, they're among my favourites. This one is where I spend my summer. It's Runswick Bay in Yorkshire. Very lovely, can recommend it. But obviously also recommended are the ones we're going to hear from today. To take you through that is going to be Joe Gunn, the chair of the event. So Joe, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ross. Very warm welcome to all of our guests. I can see you're actually still coming into the room, actually. So we've got a large number of delegates for this particular session, which is fitting as it's our last one of the week. Welcome to what I would love to describe as a sunny seaside beachfront, which is obviously where I would like to hold this event. The weather was against us, so clearly we're going virtual. And I would also like to welcome my guests for the day, who are Eddie Kemsley, who's the CEO of Dreamland, which is Margate's, I'm going to say it's its biggest attraction. Wikipedia just says it's one of them, but I think it's the biggest attraction. I've got Chris Shephard, who's Director of Development at Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, and Rebecca Handley, who's Deputy Executive Director of Go Southampton. So a warm welcome to all of you, as well as to our delegates. So delegates, we're going to have a little chat here, which I'm hoping you're all going to enjoy, talking about regeneration opportunities and seaside towns. And after we've done that, we're going to take questions from you. You will have 2 ways in which you can ask questions. You can do it via the Q&A, and please use the Q&A rather than the chat, because I don't necessarily monitor the chat. So if you want to ask a question to the panel, stick it in the Q&A. You will also, when we get to that point, be able to wave a hand at me, and I would be able to bring you in so you can verbally ask a question to everybody. And I would love to do that as well, because it's so much nicer to hear your voices than just to do it all by typing it in. If you'd start to think of those questions and then get them over to us in the next 20 minutes or so, that would be fantastic, and it gives us much more time to answer them and get back to you all on everything that's been discussed. So I grew up in a seaside town, and I admit that I'm also married to somebody who grew up in a seaside town, and though in his case it's Southend and mine it's Brighton. But they were always exciting places, and they were full of life and bustle, and they always looked forward, and you never ever had a dull moment in any of them. They have, of course, been impacted by COVID. And I think it's been interesting over the past 6 months to watch whether we've either had too many people at the seaside, or we've had too few people at the seaside to make it economically viable, or we're delighted everybody's returning to the seaside, but please would they return in smaller groups and keep their distance. So it's been a massive challenge for everybody who works around those areas to try to handle how best to cope with the current situation, which is now going to be ongoing for some time. Like many other areas of the country, economically it's going to feel a bit like 3 winters, because an awful lot of our seaside towns do rely economically on that summer trade. So it will have felt you had winter, you didn't quite get back in the summer, and I feel that we are now going back into another winter. Certainly looking outside my window, it feels very much like winter at the moment. So with that background to us, we're going to look at how our seaside towns are faring, and what can they do, and what have they already done to turn their fortunes around, and what are the opportunities available to them as individuals and companies are increasingly looking to change their working practices and become more agile in terms of where they are located. I'm going to start with Eddie. Hello. I was wondering, what have been the key drivers for Margate's regeneration over the recent years, and how has Dreamland managed to play a role in this, and your future plans for the company? So I'm guessing that you've had a really quite exciting summer in terms of all the challenges, and all the opportunities that we now have going forward?
So yeah, I mean, Margate's been, had a lot of coverage over the last few years with its regeneration, and I suppose it really started, the catalyst for it was the opening of Turner Contemporary Gallery about 10 years ago in the town, and that really started this sort of arts and culture-led regeneration which Margate's gone through. Dreamland reopened 5 years ago in 2015, but it's actually been in Margate for 100 years. This year was supposed to be our centenary. We had lots of plans and lots of great events and things organised for this year to celebrate 100 years of Dreamland's history, and of course all of that pretty much had to be cancelled or postponed. Dreamland itself sits right in the middle of Margate, and it's right on the seafront, and I think Margate as a town was built originally for leisure. So, over the last couple of centuries, really, it's been created for Londoners coming down. The train line drops you off right on the seafront, which is really quite unusual for a seaside town, because you get off the train and you are right there. You can see the sea, you can see the beach. And the bay itself is quite small. It's the nearest sandy beach to London, and has beautiful architecture all the way around. So it's got this kind of, the right ingredients for regenerating. Obviously, like a huge amount of seaside towns, Margate was very, very popular in the sort of 50s and 60s. And then when cheap airfares came in and everyone, worked out they could go to somewhere like Malaga for the sort of same price as a week in Margate, they decided to go abroad. There was that sort of, attraction to go overseas. But what we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years in Margate is this sort of arts and culture scene really grow. Lots of makers, creators setting up shop down there. Price is still quite low, able to get gallery space and space to start up businesses in the creative sector. And as those people have come in, we've seen that really attract those looking for kind of culture whilst being by the sea. Interestingly, with what's happened over the last 6 months, we've seen almost a sort of acceleration of that. Prices went up this summer, in terms of property prices, as people sort of realised they didn't need to be in London 5 days a week, and were attracted to going to the seaside, or moving out of London at least. And so we're sort of seeing even more grassroots stuff coming through now, which is quite interesting. And I think that's probably where the future growth's going to be, in terms of companies and people working out that they can run their businesses from towns like Margate successfully, going into London a day or two a week, as opposed to perhaps coming out to somewhere like Margate, for a weekend or a short break. So I think with, the significant growth in staycations, the fact that people are working differently and they can take a Friday or a Monday and work in different locations, I think those are the things that are going to attract people to towns like Margate. From our perspective, we've rejigged a bit, and we're now looking at some significant capital investments. So we're looking to raise money to do a load of projects that we had in the pipeline, but we brought those forward where operational businesses had to take a back seat. And we're now looking at our hotel developments, developing conference centres and other facilities to sort of go along and around our sort of core offering of Dreamland, which is an amusement park and an events venue and a festival venue. There we go. In a summary,
you've got it all in one place. That's really, actually, it's very interesting to hear about how it's developing as a sort of almost like a creative cluster. And to see that could become Margate's sort of almost like unique selling point going forward, as a way in which you can attract talent to the area that will then help regenerate.
Yeah, it's really starting to attract some very, very interesting creatives and people who are now seeing what's going on there and coming down and investing in, like I say, investing in things like galleries and performance space and making space and that kind of thing, which obviously in itself then becomes an attraction to visitors wanting to come to the town.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you're looking at attracting people as well, and that's an additional attraction. Chris, can I turn to you now? Give us a little bit of information about how Bournemouth has been handling things. You've really got a big tech cluster, I understand, so that seems to be a major draw for Bournemouth. So how is it reinventing itself at the moment, and what are its future development plans?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, well, like Eddie, I mean, I think there's lots of similarities, and I think we're probably all going to say that our seaside towns are full of the perfect place to be, and especially right now where COVID is drawing people to home and giving people a sort of a new look on life. Bournemouth and its surrounding towns, Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole, as we now are a council for, it has 400,000 people in it. We're the second biggest conurbation or place in the southwest, bigger than Southampton and Portsmouth put together by population. And actually, to answer your question, you've got to go back to pre-Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole council days. So that's before the early part of last year. And Bournemouth was a small place really for a long time, and between 2000 and 2007 had really little investment during what was otherwise a really boom time. But what the council did at that time, before my time, was to form a 20-year vision and a really strong, all-inclusive, all-encompassing vision for the town, working with major stakeholders like the universities, of which there are now 3, the college, the business community at large, and really drove through a vision with political leadership, but crucially set up a really interesting vehicle, which was a local asset-backed development vehicle with Morgan Stanley Investments called the Bournemouth Development Company. We basically tried to sell a few of our sites, sort of surface car park sites, for a few years. Didn't really go anywhere in terms of the market appraisal, and we just didn't really have any interest in the place, despite it being full of loads of potential. So this mechanism enabled us to work with the private sector to bring forward sites that would otherwise have been stalled. And as a result, we started a bit of a building boom. By 2013 and 14, we had cranes in the sky developing out buildings that people had previously said were impossible, largely town centre flats, largely for local people, also a student accommodation build before it became a boom. And the crucial thing in that time was to put the car parking back in underneath those blocks or near those blocks, so that we didn't take away the car parking in the town, but made the most of those sites. But what it meant was we had a vision for the town. We had political leadership, which coincidentally meant it was the same colour for a good 10 years. So that helped in terms of stability, even though there were staff changes, the leadership was the same. And I think really it was about capitalising on the environment that we have around our area. So we have 10 miles of sandy beach. We might not be as close to London as Eddie and even Rebecca, but actually what we have is a huge historic wealth as well around the Sandbanks area and parts of Christchurch and parts of Bournemouth. And coupled with all of that, JP Morgan landed in Bournemouth in the late 80s and bringing 4,000 people with them. So we have the third most employees in financial services across the country in Bournemouth. So what we have is a year-round economy. We don't just have a tourism economy. And whilst the tourism economy is hugely important to us and massively affected by the recent events, it is all about all of it. And now more than ever, it's about the quality of life that we have here. So then during that time, the university spawned quite a few people in animation and web design and various creative industries, but largely around the digital sector. And they all stayed and opened up businesses or grew businesses in Bournemouth. And that helped us become the fastest growing tech community that Tech Nation reported in 2015 in the country, beating off the likes of London and Liverpool and Manchester at the time, much to people's surprise. But that was actually down to industry jumping on the bandwagon and saying, we've got something here, we want to support it. And the council supported that as well. And when I came into post in 2014, I'd formed a team of account managers, basically, so the council could have key people driving the big industry sectors for our place. So we had a massive tourism team that was supporting the tourism economy already, working on major events like the Bournemouth Air Festival, which brings in about 1 million people a year over 3 or 4 days. But we also then had a sector manager for the digital sector, for financial services, and for our advanced manufacturing community, which is also really big. So we have the likes of Sunseeker building exotic yachts down on the water. We have Lush and other big companies like Magellan sadly just left us, but we have a big airport with us as well. So we've got a large aircraft manufacturing industry there as well. So it's an all-round picture as well as our beautiful environment. And I think going forward, that's going to be interesting to see how that all works. We've got over 10 major regeneration programs across the conurbation. We're now obviously one place, as I mentioned. So we've got the likes of Poole Town Centre. We've just invested £5 million in a former power station site right on the waterfront at Poole, which is a massively challenging site for us. That was actually a part fund with us and the LEF and Homes England. We've got various other town deals, Future High Streets Fund. I'm sure the other places have got those as well. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is we're trying to invest in our infrastructure and our environment and keep our broader natural environment great to encourage people to live here, because I think if you can attract the people, you can keep attracting and supporting the businesses that grow here.
Thanks very much. I think I'm beginning to think that we have actually named this session wrongly. It is not, of course, about seaside towns. It seems to be about very effective, economically viable, all year round towns that happen to have beaches attached.
Pretty much.
With the exception of Southampton, which I understand is not technically a seaside town, although I've been there and it's got a really impressive seafront, which I absolutely love. So I'm going to turn to you now, Rebecca, and ask you to tell me a little bit about the role that you think that bids have in supporting regeneration in seaside towns, and how important the public realm is in terms of us being able to drive forward perhaps the perception of these towns as being more than just beaches with some slot machines attached.
Thanks, Jo. So bids can galvanise a local business community to support a shared vision for an area and invest vital funding to transform a location for the benefit of the business community and visitors and residents alike. As a strong business voice for an area, a bid can challenge and champion for critical commercial investment in a city and a seaside town. In Southampton, the bid is working with Centre for Cities to demonstrate the value of commercial development to drive economic prosperity to the region. In addition, the bid has worked, as Chris mentioned, in Bournemouth, but in Southampton, we've worked in partnership with Southampton City Council to submit the city's application to the Future High Street Fund to transform the heart of our city. And just this week, Southampton has launched its bid to become the UK City of Culture in 2025. Go Southampton, as a key strategic partner, is supporting the city's application to achieve this valuable accolade. And the UK City of Culture is a driver for cultural-led regeneration, which in turn delivers a broad range of social and economic impacts. In terms of the importance of public realm in an area, the public realm is an important asset to our city, as it's a place where visitors can dwell, communities can thrive and businesses can trade alongside. The experiences that people have within the public realm and the destination as a whole can influence the perceptions of the destination. For us at Go Southampton, we have a dedicated programme of work to achieve a great city centre experience, which meets the basic needs of feeling safe and welcome in our city, but also exceeds those expectations by animating the space and making people feel they have a memorable experience whilst in the city. The pandemic has also allowed us at the bid to work with Southampton City Council and the hospitality sector to pedestrianise highways to allow for outdoor dining and to create new spaces that are safe and welcoming to visit.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. That's actually really interesting. So we are looking now at sort of some quite exciting new towns, effectively, that are on the seafronts of the UK, and how they can contribute overall to the future economy of the country. I'm going to pose a bit of an interesting question here, because I did note that you are all participating as areas in a request which went to the Chancellor for £1 billion to support something called maritime decarbonisation, which is looking at additional ways in which we can use green technology and advance our technical ability and drive skills in this area, as well as rejuvenate and improve our seaside towns. And I think it's a very interesting bid for money, because a lot of it is backed by the number of high-level tech jobs that it could obviously deliver. I'm going to turn to Chris on this to see if he can give us a little bit more of information about what you think this might achieve if it were to be agreed.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. Well, I think the first thing to say is that regardless of the political change locally in the last couple of weeks at our place, all of council supported a climate change emergency when it was hot to trot a year ago or so, and I think that continues, and I think it's really important that we build that into whatever our future economy plans are. So this is a really welcome opportunity. We have a really thriving, vibrant port at Poole, so massively part of the Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch conurbation. It's not as big as Southampton's, but I think the collaboration there is good and strong. We need to make more of that, but we have a really strong manufacturing industry off the back of that. As I mentioned, Sunseekers before, but that's just one company who are based around the Poole port. I think the other element to this, though, isn't just about keeping our place green and sustainable environmentally, but also about the future technologies. And one of the things we've been working on is a European funded project called SPEED, which is about smart ports. So we've been working with the port and with European partners on smart technologies in and around the port. I think, you know, we've had staff members wading out into Poole Harbour, putting sensors into the water to manage things like tidal flow, to give us real-time data on things like tidal flow, you know, the quality of the water, and so on. And that will help with the nitrates issue, which I believe is, you know, an issue that the South Coast is grappling with particularly, but the rest of the country, I'm sure, as well, in terms of how the development affects nitrates in the water and what people will do about that. So I guess what I'm saying is we're using technology already to try and help, you know, improve and create jobs and improve the opportunity. If the Chancellor was minded to give us more funding, that would be welcome, and we would love to invest it in more projects like that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to look over to Rebecca now and say, we're all actually trying to move towards more of a net zero carbon economy. We're all trying to live more sustainable lives. And oddly enough, COVID has actually forced us to do that to a certain extent. We are all today communicating on Zoom, and we are all travelling less. And that has an impact on our town centres and the way in which we shop, I suppose, and the way in which we are going to try to be more sustainable going forward. Rebecca, what are the impact of that on Southampton, and how can it adapt to make itself more sustainable and keep its current vibrancy going forward?
So as part of our response that we worked with Southampton City Council through, the council awarded funding from central government to introduce a green transport recovery plan. And that was really key for us to partner with the council on certain projects. We introduced something called Southampton Inside Out, which was our outdoor dining, where we were able to turn roads that predominantly had been used for cars over into pedestrianised spaces, and allowing our businesses that were struggling with their capacity to safely operate with social distancing to utilise the outdoor space and actually create new public squares, which was really important for us. We also found as a city, we saw a 64% rise in cycling in the city during the lockdown period. And it was really important as a city that we could kind of harness some of that modal shift to try and encourage more active sustainable travel modes being utilised in the future. So there's a lot of work going on in the city to try and increase cycle usage and bus usage across the city going forward.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Classic mistake there. Thank you very much. It's because somebody's decided to do building work just behind me. If I'd known that, I would have put headphones on. We've got a lot of questions starting to come in, so I'm going to encourage our delegates to keep asking the questions, and I will get round to them. You've meant both Chris actually and Rebecca, have mentioned an element of the areas they're in that have key ports. An awful lot of non-EU trade and goes through those ports. In fact, someone who's very kindly, Guy Bransby, has written in to say, I understand 80% of non-EU trade goes through the port of Southampton. Is that true? Yes, that is true, because I've written that stat into a placemaking narrative for the area, so I know that one's true. In which case, is this a growth opportunity post-Brexit? Now, would anybody like to pick that one up? Chris is nodding. So
I don't want to steal Rebecca's thunder, but I can probably add something on it, which actually is a bit of a South Coast pitch, to be honest. You know, I think between Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole, Southampton, and Portsmouth, where we've got a really strong offer, but we need to be a bit clearer with government about what our pitch is, what our ask of government is, and what our offer to them is. And you know, the rest of the country is probably looking at us and thinking, God, bloody hell, you guys are the gateway to the rest of the world. You've got one of the biggest ports, if not more, you know, 3 big ports, but one of the biggest ports, you know, on the South Coast. You know, why haven't you got a story? And I think our story is, you know, we have got a story, and I think our story is one around environment, quality of life, opportunity, all the industries that Rebecca and I have talked about, and our brilliant town centres and city centres. But fundamentally, yeah, absolutely, those ports will be a massive driver for us after Brexit. And actually, we're doing some work at the moment talking to government about how the regulations that we might have to set up offices and civil servants for, and how they could be present and located down on the South Coast. And I think, you know, what we don't realise is that Europe takes a lot of that regulation at the moment, and we will need to do something similar post-Brexit. So there's an opportunity for us in the office world and the home workers world, as well as the freight movements.
Okay, Rebecca, what about you? Do you have a view on this one? The impact of Brexit, which could be both good and bad, depending on your viewpoint.
Now, as Chris mentioned, we do see ourselves in Southampton as the gateway to the world. We obviously do rely on the cruise market, but we also have kind of the port side of the activity in the city as well. And as I said, it's one of those key opportunities for us to kind of strengthen the kind of remit of the city. We already have fantastic links, but actually I think, as Chris indicated, the port will become more significant in a post-Brexit world.
Thank you very much. Eddie, I actually have a specific question for you, which has come in. So Brian Horton has written in, and he has said, I fully agree with Eddie on the direction of travel for Margate and culturally energised regeneration, which is a lovely phrase. I shall remember that, culturally energised regeneration. More DFLs seem inevitable post-COVID and are good for the Thanet economy. But what will this do for the local housing market, and how can we ensure local people sharing the benefits of this regeneration? And he says he's not just a housing consultant, but he's a former ride operator at Bembom Brothers, which may or may not mean something to you. I don't know.
It does. That was one of Dreamland's iterations was Bembom Brothers in the 80s. So hi, Brian. I mean, I think, this is a really interesting point about regeneration. And we always talk about regeneration, not gentrification. And I think that's really key. In terms of how the locals and the people that are born and bred Margate, benefit from regeneration, I think we have to continue to work hard on the community piece. And I think a lot of that comes down to education. I know we're going to touch on that a bit later, but I think that is really key, that tertiary education piece and giving young people a reason to stay in a town. And that's sort of usually where things start to go wrong, when that sort of generation are getting up and leaving. And I know Chris mentioned it, that there's 3 universities down in his area now, and I'm sure he'd agree that that's absolutely crucial to keeping towns vibrant, lively, interesting, and bringing in fresh talent, fresh ideas, new businesses and that kind of thing. So I think really it's about making sure that it is regeneration, not gentrification. This isn't just about house prices going up. It's also about making a real working town that's got longevity in the future.
Well, thank you very much. You've actually moved us quite nicely onto our next topic, which is, of course, skills. And I think it comes on quite nicely from what everyone's been saying earlier about the importance of technical jobs, clusters, creative clusters. You're clearly developing lots of very highly successful industries in what I'm going to call that knowledge sector. And how can you meet perhaps the skills requirement and retain the talent that is needed to drive those industries? So I'm just going to go around each of you and ask you about the importance of the education sector in terms of driving regeneration, and what you think is being done, or perhaps more could be done, in order to make sure that we have the match for the skills we need, what we're actually educating people about. So I'm actually going to start with Chris, if that's okay. Chris, what's your view on that?
Sure. We've been working with the universities and the college for a long time, and the schools actually. Well, it's a massive subject. We're just creating a new economic development strategy for us, and a key part of that is our skills strategy. I think it goes from the beginning right through to the graduates. And for me, I'm very passionate about young enterprise, for example. But we have a careers and enterprise company which oversees a number of different routes for young people to get involved in enterprise. And I think it's really important that we encourage people at that age, and we work closely between our economic development team and our skills team to try and bring that together. Indeed, we've just got a new portfolio holder to really drive this agenda as well under the new administration, which I'm looking forward to sort of working more closely on. I think, in practical terms, one of the things we've done recently is a bit of a mapping exercise around this very subject, because as part of the town deal bid that we're putting in for a place called Boscombe, which is a part of Bournemouth, we're looking to use skills and employment as part of our regeneration there. So there's very much a physical regeneration element to this, a master plan around houses and homes and affordable homes. But actually, we are putting together as part of it an employment and skills hub for local people who are particularly low skilled. And actually, this part of our conurbation is an area of massive deprivation. So in amongst all the great stuff I was talking about earlier, we've got 2 of the most deprived wards in the southwest. and that's a real challenge. So helping those people access the right skills and then being right for the labour force that we need of the future is going to be quite an interesting journey. But the mapping exercise we've done has been really good because it's helped point out where the gaps are and where we could then focus them. And actually Boscombe, a bit like Margate, has a cultural heritage, and we need to sort of pick that bit up and make that as part of our future planning for it. But the education establishments do a great job, and I think in terms of the future, talking sort of much more technically, one of the areas we're focusing on is around medtech. We've got a really booming connection between the Bournemouth University's animation and creative arts faculty, but also then their nursing and health and social science faculty. They just built a brand new building in the edge of somewhere called Lansdowne, which is right by our central station in Bournemouth, to service that. And there's loads of stuff that's buried away that people don't know about, like our Orthopaedic Research Institute and the medical imaging scanner. These are world firsts. And we're trying to develop an opportunity at our Wessex Fields site, which is right next to the Royal Bournemouth Hospital, to try and drive a campus around this industry. If you couple the university's specialisms together with a transformed hospital and perhaps an older population that might be looking for new and innovative ideas and solutions to help them in later life and help them be work ready, that's something that we're really excited about as well. So we're kind of trying to act across the spectrum and intervene and provide solutions for skills for all sorts of industries going forward to help our economy.
Well, thank you very much. I was actually talking to someone the other day, and they were looking at a scheme to retrain actually engineers, strangely enough, from the aviation industry, which had been hard hit, into jobs in actually digital and film. Because a lot of the skills you may not think were the same, but actually when it comes to computer generation, there was a similarity in it. So could they transfer people's skills into new industries?
And a lot of the work that my team do that goes unnoticed is that brokerage. So one of the things we can offer companies that have sadly had to make redundancies recently is that connection between the skill sets and start to say, well, these people aren't just aircraft engineers, they're actually designers, and they're using CAD systems and simulating and testing and using data. So that can be picked up and used in a different industry. So that's a really important role that is sort of silent support from behind the scenes, but actually is really important to those people.
Thank you very much. Eddie, would you like to come in on the skills issue at all? I mean, you've talked about the importance of it, but is there anything else that can be done in order to ensure that we are as ready as we possibly can be to take advantage of these industries which are becoming known in your areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other key things is around short courses and very industry specific courses. And we, obviously universities offer fantastic degrees which are 3 years long, but really looking at kind of how we can offer short, sharp training for people, because we are seeing this huge acceleration in what was happening anyway in terms of Seaside regeneration, but it's going to, in my opinion, really explode in the next sort of 24 months. And I think we've got to be ready for that, as those professionals are moving out of cities like London and wanting to come down and relocate. Businesses are realising they don't need to be paying big office prices in city centres anymore. We've got to be ready for that. So I think really looking at what the town needs and then working out how we can train people, how we can upskill people to be able to provide that and provide it to a really high equal quality to what people would be receiving in any city.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, do you want to come on this one, because of the value of skills and how we can make sure we are appropriately skilled for the future?
Yes, no, definitely, Jo. One of the kind of key areas that are focused in Southampton is about the apprenticeships and utilising the apprenticeship levy transfer opportunities. We have lots of large employers that are unable to kind of utilise it for their own business. And we've got a really good system in the city and across the Solent, and we're able to transfer that funding to our SMEs and actually upskill our smaller businesses that have, the heart of what we do in the city. But also there's obviously a particular focus on the kind of under 24s in terms of the job market and getting those individuals into work. I've actually benefit from the apprenticeship levy transfer, as I said, from our council, so working at Solent University, doing a senior leaderships and degree apprenticeship, but actually that's really important for us to get people involved in that apprenticeship movement and upskilling whilst on the job and getting experience straight away.
Well, thank you very much. I've got a nice lot of questions coming in now, so thank you very much, delegates. Keep them coming. I've got one specifically for Eddie now, which is going to be really put you on the spot. So it says, Eddie, could Margate have been regenerated without the capital investment in Turner Contemporary and the continuing cost to the public of operating it?
Yes, but not as fast. I mean, you know, ultimately Margate is a town, and I've said this already, but, you know, its proximity to London, those cornerstones for regeneration, connectivity, creativity, community are there. However, when you shine a spotlight on a town by building something like Turner Contemporary that has world-class art exhibitions coming to it, of course, you're going to speed that up and really help that regeneration process and attract more creatives more quickly into a town. So Turner Contemporary has done amazing things for Margate, and that's really sped up the process that would have happened in Margate anyway.
I think that's actually a really interesting answer, that actually speed of getting us towards the future is really important. It leads me a little bit back to Chris, because he talked about his 20-year vision. And I was wondering, I was going to ask this rather evil question, and I was going to say, how much of that 20-year vision holds post-COVID? Do you think this is just a temporary blip and you will continue to be able to deliver it? Or do you think it will need reworking?
That's a good point. I think the first thing I'd say is, having lived and worked here for 10 years now, I think I'm quite envious of Margate's Turner institution there. We don't have a similar sort of scale or profile cultural offer. We have lots of other things. We have the lighthouse in Poole and the pavilion and the pavilion dance in Bournemouth, but they're not a world famous cultural attraction like that with a name or a brand of someone attached to it like Turner, who really draws the crowds. And I think that's something that we lack. However, we have other things like the beach, for example. So we still bring in our crowds, as it was seen in the summer. In answer to your question, Joe, I think the challenge is going to be around viability. Land values are really high where we are, and it's really difficult to get development away, which is why I led with the Bournemouth Development Company, although it's not the only game in town. And I know there's some of my colleagues from the Bournemouth Property Association listening, and I'm sure they would agree that it's challenging to get development away, but it's still happening. And we've just tried to use that vehicle to kickstart and show that it's possible. So I think it's the office bit for me that's going to be difficult, and also the future of town centres in terms of the retail and this relaxation of the planning rules, and what sort of impact that has on our town centres. I think we're still keen on an active frontage in our town centres. What that doesn't mean is it's got to be retail. I think we've got to think about experience, and what we're talking about through the Bournemouth town centre bit is weekday convenience, weekend experience. And I think it's probably a bit more than that, because you can have an experience through the weekday as well. But it's about it's going to be about what those places transition into, but I still think that town centre living bit, the footfall, the people there that are there 24/7, the communities around our town centres, that's still very much part of the vision, coupled with, of course, our beautiful environment, which isn't going anywhere. So I still think it's achievable. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to Rebecca now, because you've made some interesting points about retail and changes and how you can still support things like a weekday and a weekend experience. And I think this is something where bids have a really major role that they can play. So I was wondering if Rebecca wanted to come in and tell us about some of her thoughts on how this can be achieved.
I think it is really critical for bids to be that voice for business, but also being able, as I mentioned in my first bit, to galvanise a business community around a shared vision, where obviously, as I'm sure all locations are, it's a tough time for businesses at the moment. So we're quite fortunate in Southampton that the impact of COVID hasn't been as extreme as some of our northern counterparts, with obviously second lockdowns. But for us, it's about delivering tangible benefits with immediate effect. Our levy payers, who we represent, need that support now. They don't need it in 20 years. It needs to be tactical interventions that can drive interest in the city that we obviously operate in, drive traffic to their business, but also enhance their trading environment. So we do a lot of work about reducing their costs, creating an environment that is safe and welcoming. And actually, that at the moment, it is those basic needs that our businesses need us to do. Make sure that Southampton is safe and people want to feel comfortable coming into the city, and build up that consumer confidence that has been lost in lockdown, and actually giving consumers the opportunity to come in, feel comfortable, and just keep that return visit continuing going forward.
Thanks very much. I'm sort of going back to sort of the earlier part of Chris's comment, which is, and I've got a really good question here, which is, how can we capitalise on the opportunity to stop the commuting to the cities from the resorts? How do we get the next JP Morgan, or have those days gone? It's an anonymous question, but I think it's actually a very good question. I can see some nodding going on over there. And Eddie, you unfortunately nodded at just the wrong time. So I'm going to start by saying, would you like to see
I think
how we can stop people, just using you as places for dormitories and going away, but keep those skills and those big corporate companies in there to keep you there as economic hubs all year round in your own right?
I think this is about facilities and amenities. It's about having the space for people to work from, about being able to everything from obviously high speed internet through to good working environments, places where people can do desk sharing or hire or rent good office space, buy space, and I think what we're going to see is everybody's work from home. So whether you love it or hate it, it is a bit Marmite, the working from home thing. People are going to work in much less formal environments moving forward. They aren't going to, need the big office blocks with floor to ceiling glass elevators and that sort of thing. In fact, that kind of more sort of familiar home style office setup is going to be much, much more acceptable, and it's going to be much more acceptable to be able to invite people, to meetings in your house converted, or your office on one floor of your home, or those sorts of things. So I think it's about making sure that the councils are ready for people who are wanting to put planning in. They're fast tracking things for people to be able to convert buildings and premises and get those things moving, about making sure that the connectivity is there, about making sure that people working have got that infrastructure set up. So even just the most simple things, but IT support is available in your towns for people who are trying to set up and work from those towns. It sounds really simple, but actually if you can't get someone to come and sort your IT issues out in your new setup, you're going to get very frustrated very quickly. So I think we have to make it as easy as possible, and make people feel like actually that getting on the train is really pointless. Why would I do that when I can sit in my beautiful seafront office and go for a lovely walk with a dog at lunchtime, and and have a glass of wine in a nice cafe bar looking over as the sunset, etc. We've got to woo them in and make them realise they don't need to get on the train and go to London.
Thanks very much. I think you've wooed me already. I think I'm moving down there with my dog and my glass of wine going forward. Chris, what do you think on this point? How do we get those corporates? And do we actually need them?
Well, first of all, I'll do the right thing and say that we're always welcome to talk to anybody that's looking to relocate their business here. So, absolutely. But, Eddie's right. The challenge is going to be around what sort of terms and conditions they're looking for, what sort of numbers stack up for them in terms of a space. I don't know that many of them actually know what they want, and that's whether they're relocating out of London or whether that's based in Bournemouth already. And we've got examples of that at the moment where HR and estates people, having had one deal pre-COVID, are thinking now, well, bloody hell, I don't know what I need. Do I need 10 floors or 5 floors or 3 floors or what? I don't know yet. And that's having an impact on development. But I've said it before and I say it again, and I think Eddie said it earlier too, it's about the people. So if you've got the quality skills here in your place, then I think the companies will either people will form those companies, or those companies will follow because they can get the talent. And actually it's going to be less about the floor plates, it's going to be more about them having those hotspot locations within flexible workspaces. That has a knock-on effect, of course, to the property industry and the finance industry, who don't look for that. They need more security than that. And I think that's going to cause some challenges going forward.
Eddie, over to you. You want to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to, so just to add to what Chris said, I think the other thing that's really important is we're seeing this shift away from, people being employed as much, and therefore offices needing to be as big and spaces needing to be as big. And we're seeing, people start to work in a way where they're bringing lots of consultants together for projects, for team, for certain things, rather than people being employed by an organisation as much. And I think having really good meeting spaces in towns, having really good facilities for bringing, whether it's small teams of 20, 30, 40, 50 people together when they're working on something for periods of time, will be really important as well, as we see that shift from employee to sort of consultant freelance working.
Thanks very
Absolutely,
much.
Eddie. Sorry, Joe, could I just come back in on that? I also had to shut my mic down because my wife decided to walk in and rustle a bag at that time. So I'm sorry. We were talking earlier about people doing inconvenient things and during this events like this. So apologies if everybody heard that. I agree with Eddie. We're going to need to have those kind of spaces available, but we are seeing that there is still the demand for office space and good quality office space in the right location. They're just on small, perhaps evolved floor spaces, and I still think it's about your local community as well. So we've got lots of businesses that are about that sort of 5,000 to 10,000 square foot sweet spot that probably still need to think about those future growth spaces and whether they want them in the format that Eddie's talking about or in different layouts. That's going to be the challenge. I think that we need to find a way to provide spaces for those businesses who do want to collaborate in whatever way they want to, that they can get to those places and that they can have a good experience while they're there. And one of the things that we keep coming back to is our quality of life. There's a great video on LinkedIn at the moment from a guy who works for a law firm called Steele Raymond. And he shows him leaving his desk and then heading to the beach within 5 minutes, unpacking his paddleboard and going for a paddle in the sunset, and it's all done within sort of half an hour of leaving the office on a Friday afternoon. And it's that kind of lifestyle that we need to promote, but it comes back to the economics about the buildings. What do those companies need and how does it work? And that's going to be a big challenge for all of us going forward, I think.
I think you might actually have answered one of the questions we've got here, which is from Adam Brown, which says, as professional workers move out of cities due to the ongoing shift of working from home, what are the opportunities and risks for high amenity coastal areas becoming the focus for this relocation? And what needs to be done to facilitate or manage this? So I think we've gone around this subject to a certain extent, because there's a lot of it's going to be about how you can remain agile and flexible to adapt what you've got to whatever becomes that new working normal, which I'm not entirely sure everybody is clear about yet. So I suppose, is there something that you can do to be ready for this new normal version of working in terms of floor plates and or facilitating co-working areas, so you can be ready to take advantage of that change? Anyone like to come in on that one? Rebecca, that would be great.
I think, so for Southampton, we have got a new development site, an 84 acre or hectares of development space in the Mayflower Quarter, where we're at the moment developing our master plan for that space. And I think because we've been developing that master plan throughout the lockdown period, we've had that opportunity to tailor that master plan to have that flexibility built in, with a view that not one size fits all, and we need to have a model and a kind of vision that has that flexibility built in, with a view that we've got some underlying kind of principles of what we're trying to achieve in terms of the mixed use schemes that we'll be looking to or the council will be looking to deliver upon, that it has that flexibility. And we've taken kind of inspiration from the regional offices that we've had set up in Southampton, that have kind of set up because of that place element and the skills that are available locally, but acknowledging that actually the floor space needs that flexibility and be modular, so actually they have that ability to flex as they go, as their business grows or their business has different needs.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come in on that? No, in that case we will move on to the... Oh, Chris.
Very quickly, we had a really good conference with housing developers recently, and I think it's about being open, flexible. I think the planning and planners have to be on message of, can do, and we can, favour development. And I think political leadership is really strong as well. I mentioned it earlier. It's about having the relationships with the companies, understanding what they need, creating the right environment for people to live and enjoy themselves, investing in the things that matter, like reducing antisocial behaviour and cleaning the streets. Sounds easy when you put it like that, but it's kind of, those are the things that will keep attracting people back. And as Rebecca said, it's about the value of the place and the way you can create the right place. And I think that needs some leadership and continued commitment to those relationships.
I think we've been hearing a lot about leadership today in terms of your areas becoming places that have created environments where people would like to live and work. I have a really nice question which is coming from Liz Gibney from the Lee Evans Partnership. And she says, does the panel have any advice for towns that need to raise their aspirations and improve their offer to attract more visitors? I'm a Dover resident and I think it has great potential. So if you had to give your top tips to Liz and to Dover as to what they should do to raise their game and improve their offer to attract visitors, what would you recommend? Haven't I heard from recently? Eddie, come on in first.
I think, really it is about footfall first. So I think it's got to be about reasons to visit and really focusing on giving people a reason to visit. And there's lots of great reasons to visit Dover. It's a really nice town. And perhaps focusing, I think one of the things that people can do is try and fix the whole of a town in, with one sort of brush. And I think actually focusing on perhaps a certain region or a certain area first and foremost, and then letting that become the showcase for the town, letting that be the thing that you kind of hang your hat on to begin with, and that will attract further inward investment and be the thing that shows people what the capability of that town is. So I would keep it very small to begin with, focus on a certain area and think about things that are going to drive footfall as the sort of first pillar in that development.
Sorry. Hello, I'm hoping people can hear me. My mute button was having a moment. Chris, would you like to come in on that? What's your top tip for Dover?
I noticed, Rebecca, did you have your hand up? I should be the gentleman and offer you the floor first, because I think you had your hand up, didn't you? Or am I putting you on the spot?
I'm going to ask both of you, so go
Sorry,
on.
Joe.
Go on, Chris.
All right, cool. Thanks. I think it's about having a clear pitch. I agree with Eddie, having that smaller area of focus to get something done. I think that's the thing. Get something done and get yourself in something to hang your hat on for a bit. Events are always good. Something that's regular and gets quite a lot of traction and publicity. I was on a call like this at another event recently with my equivalent. I think she was from Dover, and she got a story sorted out. There's a plan there. So for the Dover resident who posed the inquiry, I would suggest you reach out to them and find out what the plan is. But I think something soft like an event that's fairly straightforward in relative terms to do. Development can take a long time, and actually you need something now. Their pitch was around, if you're travelling through the Channel Tunnel or out on a ferry, stop the night in Dover and enjoy Dover first. I think that's great, brilliant. Why not? That's something to build on. So yeah, that's what I would do.
Thanks very much. Rebecca, give us your top tips.
I think what we did in Southampton was find other locations that are similar to our location in terms of the kind of demographics and the place, and actually try and find locations that are 5 to 10 years ahead of where we want to be on that vision, and go and speak to them and visit those sites and take inspiration. We go to Rotterdam quite a lot for our inspiration, because actually they are also another port city that is that sort of 10, 15 years ahead of us on their journey, and trying to take others with us. So those that may not be on that, have the same aspirations as us, take them to those locations and get them to meet the people on the ground that are driving that change. It's really important.
Thanks very much. I'm going to move to a last question, but just before I do, I'm going to do a bit of a shout out to James Child, who's in the audience, who wants to share some research with everybody, which sounds really, really interesting. And I'm going to say, can you put that link in the chat, at which point everybody will be able to see it. I don't think everybody will be able to see the link that you've just put up on the Q&A. And I think it sounds like it would be something we would all want to read later. I'm going to move now to the last question, and I'm going to go around each of you in turn, see if we can get an answer to this, which is just to say, what's the biggest opportunity, do you think, for the UK's seaside towns? I'm going to say short term and probably medium term, because I suspect that there might be a slight difference between the two. So if you want to differentiate between what do we need to do now, what's the biggest opportunity today, and what's the biggest opportunity tomorrow, that would actually be quite interesting. And I'm actually quite disappointed I'm not going to be able to put to you a question that somebody has suggested on here, which is that Barbados apparently has had a really good idea of opening up its hotel rooms for office workers to get them to work from hotels in the seaside, which is a radical plan, but may not be long term. So on that note, can I just go around each of you in turn and say, what do you think is that big opportunity that we're really looking for going forward? Eddie, would you like to kick us off here?
Well, I think first I'm going to take a leaf out of Rebecca's book and I'll probably go to Barbados to see what they've done exactly and see whether that's something we can bring back to Margate. I mean, I think, you know, it is quite obvious in the short term, people can't leave the UK, and we've got this huge opportunity to reignite their passion for, you know, the seaside in this country, and remind them for the reason why generation after generation have gone to the British seaside. I grew up on Bournemouth Beach, Chris. I loved it. I spent every single summer there with my gran in a little beach hut, and you know, it's a fantastic way to spend time, and I think people are getting that nostalgic love back for the British seaside. So I think in the short term we need to really focus on that and just getting people to remember what's great to love about the British Isles and everything we've got to offer. In the longer term, I think, you know, it is going to be leapfrogging on that and looking at staycations, looking at, you know, how people are working and the way people are working, whether they're moving completely to your seaside town or whether they are working from home in a much more flexible way that enables them to take a lot more short breaks, a lot of staycations, and utilise towns for leisure and enjoying themselves, etc. And I think that's where our focus needs to be in the kind of medium longer term, is around offering those great short break opportunities and reasons for people to come down on a Friday to Monday or during the week, because they can work brilliantly from our location as well as having a good time.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, what's your view on this?
I just want to steal Eddie's answer. No, for me, it's I get definitely the staycation is the short term. I think for all seaside locations, it's about trying to capitalise on that. But at least for kind of the longer term for us is about trying to increase living within the city centre. So we've historically been a commercial centre, but actually there's a real appetite to try and increase that kind of residential population in the city and make it a livable, sustainable city where you can walk to your work or walk to your co-working space or walk to the seafront in a break and have that work-life balance that you may not have had previously.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Chris.
What more can I say? I think short term, you know, it's an opportunity, but it's also a threat. You know, all of us have got really strong, vibrant seaside and tourism and hospitality based economies, and the opportunity there is to not let that fail in COVID. So I think, you know, we need to really work hard to support those businesses alongside the others that we've supported for the last 9 months, and that's a particularly sort of pertinent in our neck of the woods. I think you know, we also need to remember, certainly for us, that we've got a bigger economy than tourism. It is really massive for us, but also it's about supporting the all-round economy. So how do we make sure that we keep those big and small businesses growing and supported locally in the political and officer leadership for that, but also wider than that, bids, chambers, you know, and the business networks themselves. We need to continue supporting them. Long term, though, I think it's about quality placemaking, whether it's in the town centres, in the communities, or for us on the seafront. You know, we've got some brilliant assets, and we need to make sure we make the most of them without destroying the environment around them. So, you know, that's I think our long-term play, continuing to invest in the regeneration of the places that we've talked about today.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to sum up now by saying how much I have really enjoyed hearing about the places today, and how it's changed perception. I think when people think of seaside towns, they do have a perception, and I think you have blitzed through that today by talking about that all-round year-long economy. While talking about your clusters in medtech and creative arts and culture and digital. Clearly, you've all got plans to be more going forward than you have ever been before, and I'm really going to look forward to the journey that we have here. And the quality of life that you can now offer in order to ensure the places that you are the most sustainable and enjoyable places to live and work going forward. So thank you very much to all of you. I'm sorry we didn't get around to all the questions. We will try to send them around afterwards to see if we can get them all answered. But just as we finish now, I'd like to hand back to my colleague Ross and say thank you very much, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you at the next conference.
Thanks very much, Joe. And that's it. That's the last Real Estate Live event of the week. Cool. And it's Friday afternoon, and quite properly, we've knocked off early and gone to the beach, and what fun it was. Let's have that poll result I promised you from earlier. Hopefully that's going to come up now. There it is. And there we go. Building a carbon zero sustainable future was the top choice of the audience of this session. All the speakers nodding sagely. Marvellous. Real Estate Live will be back in February 2021, February the 22nd to the 26th. So if today's news that MIPIM has been postponed again leaves a gaping hole in your inward investment plans, then talk to us. We'll be there in February. All that remains for me to say is thank you to this group of speakers. Thank you very much for your time, and to the delegates, attendees who've been here. It's been marvellous to have you. Thank you also to all the speakers on our programme, well over 100 speakers this week in 28 events, and the thousands of delegates that we've had attending the events. Thank you too. It's been marvellous. I hope you've all enjoyed it. This has been Real Estate Live. We'll see you in February.